Pittsburgh Steeler fans, welcome back to another episode of The Standard is the Standard. I am Jeff Hartman, and if you're watching live on YouTube right now, you're thinking, holy cow, we got a packed house, and that's true. We do. We have 4 people instead of usually it's just myself and my partner in crime, Lance Williams. We have a slew of others. You know Dave Schofield, Deputy Dave, as we call him here around these parts. But joining us also is capologist. I hope he doesn't mind me calling him that. Capologist Ian Whetstone of Steel City Insider. Ian, welcome to the program. How are you this evening?
Hey, Jeff. How you doing? Pretty good.
Good. It's a busy time of the year for you, I'm sure, as you're crunching numbers and figuring out free agent news and salary cap positioning. But let's welcome in Lance Williams. Lance, how are you on the West Coast? Hopefully you're quarantined.
Yes, I am. And as of 10 minutes ago, there was a shelter in place for my county. So, hey, it's just changing every minute.
He's not going anywhere. David Schofield, what's up?
I'm excited to hear numbers. I'm just here because I want to get them firsthand. I'm ready to go. I got my pencil ready. I got my pocket protector. I got my calculator. I'm ready to go.
It reminds me of the old Saturday Night Live skit where they have the 2 guys that just wanted a calculator. They're like, I want a calculator. Just give me a calculator. Anyways, Lance, you have some questions for Ian. Why don't you go ahead and fire those away?
Sometimes, Jeff, your pop references go right over my head.
You have to watch Saturday Night Live. You got to watch Saturday Night Live. I'll send you a link.
Thank you. Because we all have time. But let me ask you just the first question, Ian. It's just a general CBA question. In your perspective, who won the deal, the players or the owners?
Kind of interesting because we got an unusual situation that happened right as ratification was happening, where we, got not only obviously the coronavirus stuff, but as a consequence, we got kind of a general financial meltdown. So that really, kind of improves in retrospect. That improved what we can look at what the players were able to do, because they were able to avoid going into negotiations in a really uncertain financial situation, where they're getting whatever percentage of the pie they've negotiated, which in this new one is around 48%. When the league then has to go and negotiate with TV with the networks, what kind of TV packages they're going to get. If there's financial doubt in the world, they have a harder time negotiating what revenue they're going to get. So, for the players to lock this up now and not have to worry about the uncertainty of it as the world's going through this uncertainty is much to their benefit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does.
So totally apart from the specifics of the deal, and I think that when people are looking at these negotiations, I think that a lot of times they're looking at the wrong things. You see people say, "Oh, they don't get guaranteed contracts." For the players as a group, that doesn't really matter. I mean, that only benefits a very small number of players. It's definitely not most of players. And when unions negotiating these things, they have to look at what is going to be beneficial to the most players. And so while they didn't get giant concessions in this deal, what they did get was stuff that was for the most part beneficial to a large number of players. They got big increases in minimum salaries. Not just, there's a sizable increase this year, but there's another sizable increase next year. And then the increases year to year are much higher than they've been in the last couple of CBAs. So we're looking at by the end of this agreement, rookies coming into the league are going to be making $1 million a year minimum. That's not insubstantial. I mean, that's a big deal in a league where most players never really get a big contract and their careers don't last very long. If you're going to have a 3-year career, if all of a sudden that 3-year career is at least $3 million, that's nice. I mean, that's a better position than they were in, recently.
Are the rookie contracts still slotted in this new collective bargaining agreement? It's just elevated. Okay.
Yeah, and it's so there was probably the most significant, other than the minimum salary increase, the most significant change in that regard is that there used to be a cap on how much, like even if the rookie contracts would increase along with the cap, but up to a maximum, and that maximum has been eliminated. So where it increases along with the cap. So if the cap does some big jumps, then rookie contracts will increase in the same, proportionally.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting that you brought up the whole idea of guaranteed contracts, because even in the other major sports that has them, it's not a CBA issue. It's up to
Yeah,
the individual
that's right.
agents
Yeah,
to
that's right.
actually get them for players. So
Right.
for people that thought that was going to be a CBA issue, they were kind of looking for
Yeah.
something that wasn't
That's
there.
exactly right. I mean, you see individual players negotiate.
Mhm.
What the quarterback in Minnesota, what's his name?
Kirk Cousins.
Kirk Cousins.
He negotiated. He was in a position of strength and was able to negotiate a fully
Yeah.
guaranteed contract. There's nothing that prohibits that from happening. It's just you're not generally going to be able to do it. It also, in other sports, people don't, people say they have guaranteed contracts. Well, kind of. I mean, they just use different terminology. They use, they call options, team options. Well, team option is just a non-guaranteed year. That's all that is. Just because you call it something different and because it's more prevalent, because that effect is more prevalent in the NFL, doesn't mean it doesn't exist in those sports. When you get players who are just in for training camp in any sport, they're not guaranteed. They're two-way contracts or whatever they are, where they're not guaranteed to make the money in their contract. It doesn't always mean what people think it means.
Yeah, excellent point. So, was there anything in this deal that surprised you?
I thought the players should have been able to do better in terms of getting the cash spend floors up. They got only a really minor increase. I think an increase from, in the sort of spans where teams have to spend a certain amount, they got an increase from 89% to 90%, which is negligible. They tightened up the windows a little bit, so it's not, teams don't have as wide a berth to do it over a number of years. That's something, I guess, but I thought that they should have been able to get that up to more like 95%. That's something that really makes a difference. That's something that teams year to year will spend more if they have to spend to a higher floor. It's not in particular going to a specific category of player in the way that guaranteed contracts would. It's going to be beneficial broadly. I thought that was something that they would be able to do, and they weren't. So, I think the league made out in that regard.
You have a question, Jeff, before I jump into my next one?
It's all you, man.
Is there anything important about this deal that ESPN or CNN or any of the other media outlets are kind of missing that you think is a pretty important nugget?
That's a good question. I think we'll see how there's some changes to to both the 5th-year option for first rounders and to the 4th year, what's called the proven performance escalator in all rookie contracts and almost all rookie contracts. We'll see how that plays out. One of the things when a player gets towards the end of that rookie contract is, how much of a position of strength are they negotiating from? And a lot of that has to do with how much they're going to make in that year. So with the sort of improvements for the players in these, one of them is that proven performance escalator had not previously applied to second rounders. It now does, although they have higher thresholds for meeting it. So that does now apply to second rounders, so that they were kind of in this weird space where they weren't, they made more money in their rookie contracts, but they didn't have this escalator. So in a lot of cases, like high third rounders could make more over the course of 4 years than a second rounder would, because second rounders didn't get this escalator. So it puts them in a better position. I'll be curious to see over time how that improved 4th and 5th year position for rookies translates into improved negotiating power when they do extensions with their original teams.
Now, Jeff, Dave, before you get into your question, just explain the difference in that 5th year.
Yeah, sure. I have to reread it to get the details exactly. But the main thing is, it used to be that the 5th year escalator, the 5th year option for first rounders was totally dependent on their draft position. The first 10 draft picks for that option to be exercised, they needed to get essentially the transition tag amount. And for all the first rounders after that, it was a lower amount. It was the average of the 3rd through 25th players at their position. The transition tag is the first 10. They made, I think, 4 different levels for that now, and it's not based on draft position. It's based on different performance levels. I think one of them is playing time, and then there's if you make a single Pro Bowl, if you make 2 Pro Bowls, you get the highest, which is I think the franchise tag or something like that. But they range up higher and they're more performance based. So like those guys in the back half of the first round can now hit bigger numbers for that optioneer, and especially at positions that make a lot, that can make a big difference.
Like a TJ Watt.
TJ Watt. So it won't apply to him because he I think the first group it applies to will be the year right after him. It is retroactive to a degree, but not starting this year.
Not that far back.
I think it's the draft class right after Watts.
Good
This will start to apply
to.
to. Yeah.
Nice. So,
but Watt would have hit, and Watt would have hit a higher level of escalation, and they'd be he'd be dealing from a position of greater strength when it comes time to negotiate his contract. Although he's going to get all the money in the world, regardless.
Gotcha. Before we get ready to transition now to the salary cap questions. Lance,
no, go ahead and
Jeff,
ask your question.
Yeah.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, because it's a Jeff, you got one?
Sure. My question, if we're going to go into like contract stuff, I think a lot of fans, look, I'm not a numbers guy. We said that before we went on the air. I'm a guy that says, just tell me who's here for how long. And then if they get cut, they get cut. Like I don't, whatever. They pay people a lot of money to do this. I'm not one of those people. When people see that players, and we saw a lot of this week, get their contracts restructured.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a lot of people, myself included, I don't know the nitty gritty of this as well. A lot of people view it as negative all the time. Maybe just kind of break down in simplistic terms what's going on. And if you view restructures, I guess it maybe depends on the player, depends on their experience, meaning how far into their contract they are, stuff like that. Give us your opinion on whether you think that is a positive or a negative, or is it a case-by-case type of thing?
And
most of the time it's a negative.
Well, Ian, with that too, take an example of Big Ben. What did that one look, to Jeff's point? What did that one look like?
Yeah, so we don't have details on that one yet. I mean, it hasn't hit any of the sort of official records yet. But I would guess, based on what all the other ones they've done this year, is they probably maxed it out. They probably turned as much of his various salaries into signing bonus as they could to lower his cap hit this year the most. But so all they're doing, and there are different types of restructures. There are more involved ones, and there are some that are not just restructures. They're actually extensions or renegotiations. But if you just say restructure, what they mostly means is that they're taking some portion of the player's salary, turning it into a signing bonus, just as an accounting trick. That signing bonus amount then gets prorated over the remainder of the contract in how it counts against the cap. So it lowers this year's hit and it increases hits in subsequent years. In Ben's case, my guess is that, so Ben has a salary of, I think, $8.5 million, and then he gets a $12.5 million roster bonus a couple of days into the league year. So total of $21 million. They take all but $1.05 million, which is the new minimum salary for his experience level. So 19.95 million, and they turn that into a signing bonus, and then that counts $9.975 million this year and $9.975 million next year. So it's going to knock his cap hit this year down by about 10 million from, I think it was up around 33 million or 34 million down to 23 or 24 million, and the next year it'll go up by that same amount. So he'll be up over 40 million next year. Now that's kind of an extreme case because he has a great big salary and he's in the next to last year, so it's only divided over 2 years. A lot of times they do these restructures earlier in a player's contract so that it's spread out over more years. That's not really happening this year because they don't really have players who have long contracts at the moment. I looked at it specifically a few days ago, and I forget the exact number, but I think they have no players under contract for more than 3 years right now. They will once they have a draft class. But they don't have a lot of long deals right now. They'll probably extend Hayward, and I don't know for how long now. Before there was a new CBA, I thought we'd be looking at a 5-year contract just because they would need the length to prorate it. They maybe don't now, so maybe they won't do it that long. We'll see. But it's an uncommon position. I don't remember a time since maybe the early 90s when there was no before there was free agency and there was not really a need to have long contracts. I don't remember a time when they had this few players under contract going forward into, even just a couple of years.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Because I was looking at the numbers, and for 2023, 2 years from now, the only players not on rookie deals that actually have contracts into that season are Chris Boswell and Stephon Tuitt.
Yeah,
that's it. So of the 5 restructures that the Steelers have done, the only one that was for a restructure for more than 2 years was Boswell.
Yeah.
And the other ones were off too. I have a little equation that I basically use anytime I try to estimate a restructure.
Yeah.
I take what their base salary was, I save $1 million, and I turn everything else into signing.
It's about right because because all the minimums hover around, they're a little under $1 million, but if you ballpark.
Yeah, some of it you might be off a little bit on one and not on another, but when it all comes down, it's just an estimate.
Yeah.
So those are some pretty interesting things. So now that the Steelers they're up against the cap, and now they're doing these restructures that are really pushing off a lot the next year, like the Ben Roethlisberger over $40 million. Do you foresee them any contracts that they do now, like if they extend Cam or anything like that? Do you see them constructing those differently to try to avoid like compounding next year's problem as well?
Probably not. I mean, I feel like at this point where they're sort of dealing in the twilight of Ben's career, I think they're doing it year by year. I think they look at how they construct the roster in general out farther than that. But as far as the finances of it, I think they're going pretty year by year. And then, you can always do those maneuvers again next year. It's not, people fret about it, but it's really not. It's not rocket science. Like if the players, what matters is that you pay players who live up to the contract. The cap number, you can do things about it. You can do things about it one way or another. So I don't fret about it, but we'll see.
Now I know the way they've done business the last several years. Typically, they tend to be right up on it. And I know when we did our interview several weeks ago, maybe several months ago now, you had mentioned, and I can't remember specifically, you had said that you think that moving forward, they may do their deals in a different way. Do you want to elaborate on that?
I said if they should do their deals in a different way. I don't know that they will, or I don't, unless they're really pushed to where they have to. And there's some interesting cases coming up where they may have to. The big thing that I thought was that they have been one of the last remaining teams holding out that does not guarantee dollars in veteran contracts after the first year. I don't know that that's sustainable. I think they've been able to do it to this point in large part because they don't let go of players quickly. So I think players and agents know that there's a sort of a virtual guarantee. But increasingly they've had to give up, in other contract metrics, in terms of just the general size of the contract they've been giving out, in terms of the cash flow, how early in the deal is the cash going out. They've had to give a little more and a little more to keep that. To keep that situation going where they're not guaranteeing money after that first year. And at this point, I think it's flipped past the point where it's really worth it. On the one hand, if you want to think, okay, they're not stuck with a bad contract. If they sign one, that's fine, but they're not cutting these guys anyway. So what, that's not, is it a benefit if you never use it? So I do think that's something that bears reconsideration. And there was a minor change, in this new CBA that may have some that could come to play on that, and that is that there's a rule called the funding rule, which is that any money in a contract that's guaranteed at the time the player signs it has to be put essentially into escrow by the team so that they know it will be there to pay the player when it comes due. This is a rule that was put in place for the player's benefit back when a long time ago when they first started signing CBAs and. The players thought they had reason then because they weren't sure that owners would have the money. Now there's no reason to doubt that owners have the money. And now it's totally flipped where ownership uses that as an excuse to say they can't guarantee money. They say we can't tie up all this money in escrow. We need it to operate. And it's baloney, but it's something it's something they're able to use to say that they can't guarantee as much as players want. So this current CBA increased. There used to be an exception. I think it was tiny. The first $2 million worth of guaranteed dollars did not have to go into escrow, and that's not per player. That's for the team. That's not. I mean, that's nothing. You sign a fullback. Apparently, you're going to spend more than that. So the new CBA increases that to I think 17 million, something like that. So it's an increase. It's not really it's not that substantial an increase. But it is something. There was another area I would have I think players, especially if players individually want to pursue better guarantees and contracts. That is one thing that they've got to get out of the picture is get that funding rule out. And I shouldn't be surprised at how deft the league is about this, but they totally flipped it. Like it was a rule that was only in place for the players' benefit. It should never have been hard to get rid of it. But they've managed to make it this thing well, we have this rule, and if we're going to get rid of it in our next agreement, you have to give something up in exchange, even though it was only there for the players in the first place. But yeah, I mean that's an impediment. So I think the Steelers are going to have to. I mean, at some point they are going to have to change the way they do business in that regard. They are going to start losing players that they would otherwise have been able to keep. But so an interesting case is going to be Watt next year. Watt's going to get a giant deal, and if the only money that they're going to guarantee is going to be the signing bonus, they've sort of gotten away with it with Roethlisberger because they give them giant signing bonuses, and you can do that with a quarterback more readily because he's going to be here forever unless something really unexpected happens. What are they going to give? Are they going to give Watt a $60 million signing bonus? I think they're probably going to want to structure it differently than that.
I would hope so.
So I don't know how much longer they can keep that up, and I don't think it's worth keeping it up at this point.
Yeah, gotcha. For those of you just joining it, Jeff, you want to take over?
No, go ahead, Dave.
Or I'll go say for those of you that are just now joining in and wondering what in the world are we talking about? Why do we have 4 people here? We have Ian Whetstone from Steel City Insider joining us tonight, and I'm sitting in because I just want to geek out and listen to all the great, fantastic CBA and salary cap stuff to talk about. So Ian's here answering questions. So I have the big one. And part of this wants to see how close I am with my estimates. We got all the free agent moves. We've got the restructures, the retirements. We've got the free agent signings. Where are the Steelers with the cap right now?
Yeah, so I mean the biggest variable in that is the specifics of Ben's restructure. If I'm going to assume that they maxed it out, which I think is more likely than not, I haven't been around.
If they were going to do it, they might as well max it.
Yeah, I mean, I given that they sort of did a bunch of them and then stopped doing them, it also sort of makes sense in terms of how much money they need just to kind of operate. But I had them at about $7 million when I looked at it this morning.
Okay. Now, where did you have them before free agency started? Because I know there were different reports. I was going off of a report that they were like $3 million over before they started all the restructurings and releasings of players.
So where are we saying before they did any of the restricted tenders or before they did the franchise tags? Let me think.
So I was because I go off a report and then I go and change numbers as I go.
If I remember, once I had realized that James Conner did not make his performance escalator, and so his salary was not going to escalate. I think I had them at about 199 million committed at that point. And so then the cap came in at 198, and they had about a $3 million rollover. So I would have put them at about 2 million under before any of this stuff started.
Gotcha. Because the report I saw was that they were actually over by about 3 million. So that's what I was going with the whole time.
Yeah.
But, they made about 20 million in restructures, right? If Ben was maxed out.
That sounds about right. What do you think they did? I mean, they would have got about 10 from Ben. They got about 2.25 from McDonald. They got another maybe 2. So I'm going to say they got 5 from McDonald and Hayden, and then they got 3 and change from Steven Nelson.
And so then almost $1 million from Boswell.
Yeah, so that's about right. So it's about 20. Yeah, I mean, in that ballpark.
Before we let you go, Ian, why don't you look into your crystal ball? Are there any more extensions? You think
Hayward? I mean, I think Hayward's almost a no-brainer. I mean,
and I know Dave, you had some thoughts about what that would look like in terms of the extension. Why don't you ask Ian, test your numbers?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I was just wondering, because with Hayward, you're going to have his salary that he was set to get this year, and
Right.
that cap hit, and that number doesn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
Versus someone like Dupree, who they, some people say, no, play 1 year under. This is a show me year. I'm like, that was last year. And Colbert said if they tag Dupree, it's going to be to try to sign him long term. How do either of those contracts, how do they look going forward if they do anything? Does Hayward really save much versus Dupree, who would probably save a good bit that first year?
Yeah, I mean, they certainly could pull that Dupree number down. I don't, I think if they did, I don't see the wisdom in signing him to a long-term deal. It's not that I don't like him as a player. I look at him, at best, at absolute best, he was maybe the fourth best player on the defense last year. And you're going to have to pay Watt. We're going to make Watt the highest paid defensive player in football next year. That's going to happen. I don't know how you tie up that much. So you think they'll do it next year rather than after his fifth year? Watt, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I don't particularly like even tagging him. It became much more doable once there was a new CBA. It would have been so painful to do prior to a new CBA. I did not think it was a good idea. No, I think ideologically, I don't think they ever tag anybody with any intention other than to sign them long term. It doesn't mean I think they're necessarily going to be able to do it. I don't know if they're going to be able to come to a number that they think, that they feel makes sense to do. And he knows is that if he has another good year, he's going to make, huge dollars on the open market. They're not going to tag him 2 years in a row. I don't think so. But yeah, to get that deal done now, I think you're looking at, probably $17 million a year for Dupree. And I just don't, to me, I don't want to tie that up for a player. You'd be making, you probably have to pay him comparably to Hayward. I think they're both sort of in that same ballpark. And it's going to be a longer commitment with Dupree. And I don't see how it fits.
For that number, I don't like it either because everything I did is saying you want to pay him less than what the cap is for a year on average over the course of that. Some estimates have him as only 13-14 million a year, but if he's going to want that much, then I don't think you should.
I've been wrong before. I thought Hargrave would command more in the open market than he did. He got a decent deal, but I thought he could have really broken the bank. I also thought he would go to a team where he would play more as a pass rushing interior lineman, and I don't know if that's how they're going to use him in Philly. So I've certainly been wrong before, but I don't see how in a world where pass rushers in the open market, where edge rushers get just for showing up, they get mid to high teens. I don't see how you get Dupree locked up for less than around 17 a year.
Man, this has been a lot of really deep discussion, a lot of numbers. My head is hurting, and I didn't even say much during this entire episode. It's just not my cup of tea. And I want to thank everyone in the live chat for keeping me entertained during this time. No offense, Ian. It's just, I don't know, man. These numbers, I've hated math my whole life, and so Dave's always texting me all this stuff. We got this. I'm like, dude, just tell me.
No one pays attention to my number. I wanted someone who actually cared about numbers. That's why I had to come on. I'm like, Lance doesn't care. Jeff doesn't care.
Hey, Lance, little closet numbers.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah,
he's a number guy. He
he
can't spell, and he butchers names and all that stuff.
Yeah,
he knows his numbers.
Exactly.
I'll give him that.
That's the Carnegie Mellon tartan in me.
There you go.
Bad on writing and spelling, but pretty solid on numbers. But Ian, we want to thank you for jumping on. But I do want to ask you one question because
sure.
And Jeff and Dave and I are probably going to talk about it when we do our second show tonight.
Mm-hmm.
How surprised were you that the Steelers signed a fullback as their first?
Oh my gosh.
As their first.
If it was last year where they had a little bit of money to burn, that's one thing. I don't. When you have limited resources, it's not where I would invest it.
I have a theory, and you'll have to tune into our next show to hear it. A little teaser there. I have a theory as to what they were thinking. We're going to get into that. But Ian, thank you very much. You can check out all his contributions at steelcityinsider.com. Dave, thanks for stopping in and geeking out. I know that's your forte, your MO,
that's my forte.
Whatever. Lance and I will be back. So if you're watching live on YouTube, just stick around about 5 minutes. You'll see a new notification. Check us out on a special Homer and Hater show. Thanks for everyone for tuning in.